Read Me, Part 10, by KB HURST. A Murder. I watched as I could do nothing except close my eyes. The EMT was patting me on the arm. It's all right. They're there. I closed my eyes tight, and then I heard her voice. Dad? I woke up, and I was on the floor of my living room staring up at my daughter Emily. I had no idea how I had ended up here. The last thing I recalled was going to bed after reading another chapter of the Read Me Chronicles. Are you okay? I called an ambulance. Emily, I'm fine. I don't think you are. The ambulance just arrived. I could barely get my wits about me before they were carrying me into the back of the medical vehicle. I can assure you this is not necessary. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Zephyr, but I think you may be having a heart attack. What? I asked, thinking how ridiculous that sounded. I was in tip-top shape. My daughter, Emily, held my hand as we were rushed off to St. Mary's Hospital. When we arrived, they rushed me into the ER and made Emily stay out. When all the tests were over, it was decided I was actually not having a heart attack, but had experienced a fainting spell from low blood sugar. I was advised to stay overnight at the hospital for observation. Emily was at my side in a frantic state. Dad, I was so worried about you. Oh, Em, I'm fine. May I ask, why are you in town? You didn't tell me you were coming. Oh, I just needed a break. I needed to get out for a few days, and it's a good thing that I did. Well, it's good to see you regardless. Well, tonight I'll go home and make your bed and pick up some things from the grocery store. Your refrigerator is bare, by the way, except for the ketchup and the beer. I rolled my eyes. She was so much like her mother sometimes. That night, after Emily left, I laid in my hospital bed, questioning everything I had seen in that dream. It felt so familiar and so real, right down to the needle in my neck. There was a lot I didn't understand these days. I had so many questions since that book came into my life. First, crazy magicians attacking me in my sleep, ghosts, sounds, vibrations from mountain giants. Ugh. The next morning, Emily picked me up from the hospital and she took me home. When I entered my house, I barely recognized it. She had cleaned it up, top to bottom, and even changed the water in Dobie's fish tank. I looked around and she put me on my sofa with a blanket and helped my feet into slippers, new ones she had bought me. Oh, this is silly, Em. No, Dad, you need to rest. I took a deep breath and smiled at her. Look, I'm going to leave you be. Here's a book you can read. I'm going to go upstairs and watch something on Netflix. You just rest up, Dad. I closed my eyes, and then I opened my eyes, looking down at the book she had given me. Wouldn't you figure? Read me. I smiled to myself. If there was ever a sign for me to read another chapter, this was it. A murder, a murder, a murder. I read the words over again and was shocked by the smell of sugar cookies and the sound of a sweet older woman. There was a towel that hung over a black stove that said, Elsa. She was a kind older woman, as anyone could see. She was alone, except for a nephew she doted upon, anyone who would listen to her. His name was Michael, and he was her youngest brother's child. He had long since died, and there was no one to care for Michael, so Elsa took it upon herself to help with Michael whenever she could. Michael didn't have a mother. She ran off a few weeks after he was born, and well, Elsa's brother died of a drug overdose. His mother's sister mostly raised him with some help from Elsa. Michael visited Elsa often and told her stories that made her laugh and cry. He always got a free meal and some money whenever he visited his aunt. Elsa was a bit of a recluse and spent a lot of her time with her cats, Tristan and Isolde. She loved the sound of the crows that came to visit her, and she would make sure they always had dinner. She enjoyed feeding the woodland creatures, and in a way, they watched over her. One afternoon, the largest of the crows, Billy Joe, as Elsa had named him after her long-dead father, he squawked and hung over her fence post, looking at her curiously as she tossed breadcrumbs in his direction. He always ate first, and the other crows would soon follow. Even the squirrels and the blue jays seemed to know to let Billy Joe go first. He was the king of the forest, and everyone could see it. "Oh, hello, my dear. I hope you have enough. There's a bad winter storm coming. I hope you have had enough bread for you and your pack of beautiful winged darlings," she cooed after him. He cocked his head to one side, showing no fear of the woman, and she grabbed the bread from her. He dipped it and dropped a silver coin from his lips. Elsa smiled at it. "I'll add this to the bread fund," she called out to him. She went inside her home as she heard the doorbell ring. Elsa peeked out the small opening of the door and could see it was Michael who had come to visit her. "Oh, Michael, I wasn't expecting you to at least Sunday for breakfast." Michael came in looking around and sniffing profusely. He seemed positively rugged. He had a distinct smell of someone who had not bathed in days, and under his left eye was a bruise. Elsa pretended not to notice it, and offered Michael some pie. No thank you. I was wondering," he began, almost stammering, Do you have $50 till my pay this Friday?" "Oh, Michael, that's a lot of money for me," Elsa began. Just then, Billy Joe the crow came and sat inside of Elsa's kitchen window, watching. Michael was taken aback by it. "Get you, old crow," he yelled. "Oh, Michael, be nice. This is my friend, Billy Joe Crow." The bird seemed intent on not leaving them alone. Elsa gave him a piece of toast that she had not eaten from that morning, and smiled at the bird as he flew away. "That varmint in your house? And that ain't good. You might catch something," he said with a tone of disgust. "Oh, Michael, it's fine. Tell me, when do you need the $50? "Today, if possible," he said to her, unable to look her in the eye. Elsa never asked Michael any questions. She went into her office and sat down to write Michael a check. Michael walked into her office and stood at the door. His eyes fixated on a small gold statue. It was under glass, and he suspected it was worth a lot of money, probably twice the money she was giving him. "Look, I'll make sure you get the money back in good time, Aunt Elsa," Michael said. "Oh, you have always been such a good young man. You tell me any funny stories about your job? Anything new happening in your life?" Aunt Elsa lamented as she looked at him, patting him on the cheek. She handed him the check, and she went into the kitchen. "Let me make you some lunch." She took out some bread. "Oh, well, I'm afraid I don't have any funny stories to tell today, Annie. I need to actually get going. I promise to drop by again before the weekend's out," he said, kissing her cheek and rushing out the door. Elsa touched her cheek where he had kissed it. There was something about Michael's demeanor. He was quite different from the last time she had seen him. She hoped he wasn't in trouble. He had always been such a good boy. Elsa spent the day cleaning and cooking her small dinner for herself. Sometimes she would make extra in case Michael popped by. She didn't think he would come again so soon. She had already just seen him. Elsa readied herself for the evening and ensured her doors were locked. A loud sound woke Elsa. She picked up her clock next to her bed and looked at it. It was just after 6 a.m. She could already hear the crows outside. She smiled to herself, thinking of what she would feed them today. She heard another shuffling sound, and it caused Elsa to perk up. Elsa walked downstairs into her kitchen. She did not hear anything, nor did she see anything that would cause her to feel alarmed. Elsa checked the front door, and she checked the back door. Both doors were still locked. She walked back into the kitchen, and opening the window, she had set breadcrumbs on the windowsill. Then she turned to grab 2 eggs from her fridge. As she closed the door to her fridge, that's when she saw him. She dropped both eggs onto her kitchen floor. A masked man stood between her and the back door. There was no escape route. The menacing stranger had a rope in his hands, and before Elsa could run, the man had overcome her, and he had the rope around her neck. Elsa could barely fight back. She watched as Billy Joe Crow and all the other crows flew into her kitchen, plucking at the stranger with their beaks. They had attempted to save their friend, but it was too late. Elsa was now dead on the floor. The stranger ran out the back door and locked it as he did. Michael sat in a chair looking at his phone over and over. Finally got a text that his aunt was dead. It was bittersweet to Michael. He needed the money. And with her out of the way, he could pay off his debts to the loan shark. And after all, the old broad lived a good life. Michael smiled to himself and knew he had to play his part now. And that is precisely what he did. No one suspected Michael had anything to do with his aunt's death. He took the role of a grieving nephew very seriously. Michael pretended to be unimpressed by the detectives who found his aunt's death a cold case. He knew that it would be a hard crime to solve, for he had a solid alibi, as he was working when the murder occurred. When the dust settled, Michael took his greedy heart to his aunt's house one last time. He noticed there was a small gathering of crows, all sitting in the tree above his aunt's house. He scoffed at them and went inside of his aunt's house. He knew what he had come for when he stepped into his aunt's office. The gold statue that was under glass. It was worth a fortune, he guessed, and well worth the wait. He had held off the loan sharks long enough, and he knew he had to pay up, or else. Michael hadn't noticed the window to the kitchen was open. The curtains moved with the wind outside. Michael opened the glass case to where the gold statue was. He took the glass case off the figure, and picking it up, he held it in his hands, looking at it. It was light and flimsy. What? This statue was no more real than a toy. Michael, now infuriated, threw the statue down on the floor. As he did, he heard a caw coming from the kitchen. "Stupid crow! Get, you hear? Get!" Michael saw another crow fly into the kitchen. The biggest one was the one that her aunt had let in the house all those times. Billy Joe Crow flew over and picked at Michael's head. Michael swapped at the blackbird, but he could not fight all 5, 10, or 20 of them to no avail. There seemed to be 100 all flying into the window now. They all made their way towards Michael's face. He tried to flee the kitchen, but the blackbirds had created a cloud of feathers and rendering Michael unable to find the door to escape. Michael screamed and cried as the birds stabbed him over and over with their black beaks. Soon Michael lost consciousness. The birds wasted no part of Michael. Each bird now carried pieces of his flesh away, ripping his clothes from his body, using it as a nesting material. Soon the only thing left of Michael was the car keys he had with him when he came in. Billy Joe Crow stole those and flew away with them into a tree. Several days later, one of the detectives found Michael's car at his aunt's house. It appeared as though another crime had taken place. There was blood covering the kitchen walls, the dishes, the floor. Blood was scattered and splattered everywhere. The detective wondered if there had been a second murder. They searched for weeks, but never did find Michael's body. Eventually, his murder was also a cold case. Even though Michael was never brought to justice by the law, he was brought to justice by the law of nature. Never put out what you don't want to come back at you threefold. I put the read me book down and thought of how it was that Michael had this sweet old aunt murdered for nothing except a toy. I stood up and went to put the book back on the shelf when I heard the sound of a crow out my window. I opened my window and looked at the big black bird. "Hey, buddy. Look, I'm afraid I don't have any stale bread. I may have some peanuts for you, though," I said to the bird. I found some peanuts and fed the bird what I had. The bird took the nuts and then dropped a piece of paper on the windowsill. As he did, he let out a loud caw, and then he flew away. When I looked at the paper, I realized it had an address on it. I looked at it and realized it might be what I had been looking for these last few weeks. I picked up the phone and called Julia. "Oh, hello, dollface. What do I owe this honor?" "Julia, I think I have found your aunt's last known address."